Okay, we're going to simplify some trig expressions. First of all, I would always write out all these rules. When you're learning it, I'd write it out each time. I know it sounds kind of silly to do that, but once you do it a few times, it starts coming more automatic. Obviously, all these are variations of the original Pythagorean identity. These are just your basics real quick. Okay, so let's start one of these. I already wrote the answers down. We'll explain how we got it. Now, if I look at tan squared t plus 1, I'm literally just going to look. Well, tan squared theta, or t, plus 1 is secant squared theta. So I'm going to write down secant squared theta. And then I have 1 plus cotangent squared t. Well, if I look right here, if I add the 1 to it, don't I have 1 plus cotangent, and that equals cosecant squared theta. So now I have cosecant squared theta. Okay. Now when I do the math out, or just the simplifying, secant we already know is 1 over cosine. I'm going to call it t now because I should have, but I didn't. So that's going to be squared t. And cosecant's, of course, 1 over sine squared t. And when I get the reciprocal, I get sine, and I do this. And obviously, sine over cosine's tangent. Done. That's that quick. This one's going to be a little bit worse. You see, I already started and erased it. I actually made a mistake myself. I got to go back and clean it up. So if I have a problem like this, what we have to recognize first is these are difference of squares. And you don't think about it, but obviously, well, not obviously, but if I have something like a squared minus b squared, you think back to Algebra 2 when you're like, oh, isn't that a minus b, a plus b? And you recognize it right off. Well, I got secant t minus tan t, secant t plus tan t. So obviously what that was as a common denominator was secant squared t minus, where am I, tan squared t. Okay? And I look at it like that for a second, and I just think, well, I'm going to put that negative sign right there, and I'm going to open up a big set of parentheses, so I don't have to think too much now. Now, if I say this goes into this, how many times? Well, obviously, it had to go in this many times. And this times this is just secant of t plus tan of t. Now I say this quantity goes in here. How many times? Must go in this many times, and this times this. So now I have secant of t minus tan of t. Okay? Now I'm going to distribute through this negative 1, and I'm going to do it right here. So I'll have secant of t plus tan of t, and I have, I would say, a negative secant of t, and negative, negative, positive tan of t. Okay? So right off the bat, you recognize, well, my secant's gone, and how many tan of t's do I have? Well, I have 2. So now I have 2 tan of t. And then you have, of course, the denominator to worry about. Well, secant squared t minus tan squared t, I can take the time to clean that up a little bit. Secant, isn't that really 1 over cosine? So if I have 1 over cosine squared t, and I'm minusing tan, well, isn't tan the same thing as sine over cosine? So now I have sine squared t over cosine squared t. Well, that obviously gives me 1 minus sine squared t, and if I look real quick again, well, 1 minus, isn't that cosine squared theta, or t? So this quantity right here gives me cosine squared t all over my common of cosine squared t, and that gives me 1. Well, that gives me 1, and that reduces to be 2 tan t. Okay, that was kind of a tough one, but nothing that bad, right? So right here, this is going to be a much easier one. It's very direct. I mean, when we're just multiplying secant's what? 1 over cosine. So 1 over cosine of t. Tan is what? Sine over cosine of t. And then cosine, of course, is just cosine of t over 1. And we have some very simple simplifying. Sine over cosine, tan of t, done. And again, I think you're going to feel good about this one. Okay, so I have sine squared t over 1. Cotan is, of course, cosine t over sine t. And cosecant is, of course, 1 over sine. So I do 1 over sine of t. Well, sine of t times sine of t is sine squared t. Obviously, that cancels out. And you're left with cosine of t. And you're done. So, a lot more to follow, but that is 1 through 4 of the packet.